Mr. Vice Chairman, we are recording.
Okay, great. Call to order. Meeting of the Long Hill Township Zoning Board of Adjustment for November 2nd, 2021. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the public meeting dates on the municipal bulletin board and website, by sending a copy to the Echo, Sentinel, and Courier News newspapers, and by filing a copy with the municipal clerk. Standard board procedures. Any hearing conducted by the board is a quasi-judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision. The decorum appropriate to judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Meeting cutoff. Announcement is made that, as a matter of procedure, it is the intention of the Zoning Board of Adjustment not to continue any matter past 10:30 p.m. at any regular or special meeting of the board, unless a motion is passed by the members then present to extend the meeting to a later specified cutoff time. Okay, Pledge of Allegiance. All right, Mike, I'll start. So I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
for all.
Okay, can we get a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Mr. Ronio,
Here.
Mr. Giannakis,
Here.
Mr. Grosskopf,
Here.
Mr. Malloy,
Here.
Mr. Rosenberg,
Here.
Mr. Hayne,
Here.
Ms. Robertson is excused tonight. Chairman Garrett is excused tonight, so we have Vice Chairman Johnson acting as chairman tonight. Vice Chairman.
And I'm here.
Very good. We have a quorum.
Great. Okay, first order of business, the meeting minutes of October 19th, 2021. Has everyone gotten a chance to take a look at those?
Yes.
And great. Does anyone have any corrections or comments on those minutes? Hearing none. Deb, do we do a motion for this or?
Motion and second and all in favor. Yep.
Great. Can I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes for October 19th, 2021?
So moved.
And a second? Anybody? Somebody?
Second.
Not eligible.
All in favor?
I'm sorry, did we get a second, Deb, from someone who's eligible?
Oh, Mr. Hayne wasn't eligible. Sorry.
Oh, Mr.
Second.
Hayne is eligible.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Before we begin the application, I believe our board attorney would like to make a statement regarding two of our applications for tonight.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Yes, regrettably, there was a notice error for both applications. 310 Elm Street, Block 13004, Lot 22.01, application 21-18Z, Ken Schwatek, and the application for 35 Morristown Road, Block 13404, Lot 1.04, application number 21-19Z, Chris Caeza. Both of those applications, unfortunately, the notice was deficient as published, so that both those matters will be carried until December 7 at 7:30 p.m. via a remote proceeding via Zoom, and those applications both will be required to be renoticed by way of publication in the newspaper, but they will not be required to be renoticed by way of personal certified mailing to those property owners whose property is within 200 feet of the subject property for each application. So publication notice again, but no certified mail notice, both carried to December 7. So if there's anyone here for those matters, I guess we'll see you December 7. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, our first, or I guess our only application for tonight, block is for block 14601, lot 4, zone C, 743 White Bridge Road, application number 21-13Z. Benjamin Allman, the applicant proposes to demolish an existing single-family dwelling and to construct a new single-family dwelling. Just before we begin, just to confirm with the board attorney, we have adequate and correct proof of service for this application?
This one we do, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I reviewed the contents of the notice, found it to be sufficient and found it to be timely served, certified mail on October 19, published October 21, both at least 10 days prior to this evening. So timely and sufficient content notice. The board has jurisdiction to hear and decide the application this evening.
Great, thank you. And also, would you be so kind as to swear in the board's professionals, please?
Certainly, I'll swear in Ms. Laney and Mr. Keller, as well as well, I'll swear them in first. Do both of you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Right. And when appropriate, Mr. Chairman, I'll swear in the applicant and all the applicant's witnesses.
Great, thank you. So I invite the applicant to make an open statement. Mr. Allman, is that you?
Yep.
Great. Do you have anyone representing you, or are you representing yourself tonight?
Myself tonight.
Great. So could you just give sort of, I guess, explain what you'd like to do with the property and sort of explain the application to the board? Do we have to swear in? Yeah, great. Can you swear in Mr. Allman for us?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Please raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And we have both your name and address for the record. I take it you reside at 734 White Bridge Road.
Not
43?
currently.
I'm sorry?
Not currently.
Oh, you don't? Okay, I'm sorry. Then what is your address?
161 Mount Pleasant Ave, East Hanover.
Okay, that's fine. And the subject property is 734 White Bridge Road, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Please proceed.
Great.
Yeah, so we purchased the property last August in foreclosure. Really loved the area. Just kind of wanted to rehab the house and kind of start a family there, enjoy life. And we got into it and started calling out engineers and architects, and then just saw that the house has been abandoned too long and just things were too far gone, and decided to go modular and work off the existing foundation.
Okay, so just for the clarification of the board, so the property that you purchased, there's an existing house there now that you would like to demolish and then use the existing foundations that are there and put a modular house on that foundation system?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And can you describe the condition of the house that's currently there that you'd like to tear down?
I'd say it's disrepair. There were some holes in the roof and just structural damage to it that just isn't worth repairing, or we'd have to go too far. And at that point, it's like where do you draw the line between repairing all 3 walls instead of 4,
And upon if the application were to be approved and you construct this new house, would this be your primary residence where you'd like to live?
Yep.
Great. And can you describe the house in terms of like the description of the house? Is it 1-story, 2-story, basement?
The house that's there now, or the one that
the one you'd like to build? The one you'd like to build.
Yeah, it's essentially the same square footage as what's there right now. There's a like a 2,000 square foot Cape Cod, and we're just planning on putting a little over 2,000 square foot colonial, 4-bed, 2.5 bath, I believe. And right now it's a 4-bed, 2 bath or 2.5.
And do you intend to have a basement in the house, or would it just be a first story and a second story?
The house does have a basement. We're not planning on using the basement. We had some issues with the DEP and what that lands to where we can't keep any utilities down there. So there's not going to be any access to the basement from inside the house.
So you're saying you do intend to have a basement underneath the first floor, or you don't?
Yeah, we're just going to use the existing walls there to support the new house.
So so does the current house there now have a basement? Is that?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so the current house has a basement, and you intend to tear that house down and put a modular house over that that foundation. So the existing basement that's there now would remain.
Yeah, so we'd go up a few blocks.
Okay. Okay, great. Does any board members have any questions of this witness?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
It's Jerry Aranio speaking. I have a question.
Yes, Jerry. Yep.
If you could just tell me a little bit about how it works. I mean, I don't know that that's relevant to me now, but it might become later in the application. But do you give the dimensions of the existing foundation and the modular home is constructed to conform to that, or how does that happen?
It works a little bit on both ways. The modulars come in perfect squares, I guess. So our foundation is, I'd say 75, 80%, if not a little more, is a perfect square. But over the years, the previous owners have put small additions on it. So we propose just to do, I guess, like a small addition to the footprint, just to square it off, so it
Okay.
meets the footprint of the modular, which we're only a few feet off here and
Okay.
there. But the foundations, we chose a house that was pretty close to what they have to offer, so we didn't have to
Okay.
change anything that much.
Okay. And then my second question is, that house has been there, I don't know for how long. I mean, it's like you said, it's in disrepair. Water's been going through there. I'm sure you've had your professionals, your architect, your engineer look at the basement, but by the way, are you in the contracting field at all? Are you in the business at all?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I'm just curious. So obviously they looked at it for structural integrity. Is that right?
Yes.
And they found that the existing foundation is able to withstand the new home, the two-story home?
Yeah, it's all block. It's in good shape. There's a French drain in the basement. Never any water down there. It's all
Okay.
dry and clean. I mean, it has.
I'm asking that primarily because of the location. It's in the swamp and everything. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, no,
It's dry. That's good. Good for you. Okay.
It should be good.
Thank you.
I have a question about there's some information here about the DEP not allowing a basement.
Yes.
Can you
Well,
describe that a little bit more?
They're not allowing the basement. They're not allowing inside access to the basement because of the wetlands nearby, the floodplain, I guess. So all of our utilities have to be above grade.
I guess that I'm just trying to understand. I'm not questioning that what they're saying is not what they're saying, but is it because they're afraid that if that basement did take water, then utilities would be leaching into, or would be affecting the ground around them?
No, I'd have to ask the engineer
Okay.
to clarify a little more on that. But from what I understand, I guess it would become like a hazard for the home. Like if our service panel was down there, our oil tank, hot water heater, all of that would get destroyed, from flood damage, essentially.
And when you have this new home, will it require flood insurance?
Yes, as far as I know, our property is in a Class A or
AE?
floodplain.
Okay.
So any lot down there in the swamp needs flood insurance.
Right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to that, so if I understand what you're saying, the DEP, I mean, I guess the DEP normally won't allow a basement in a flood zone, but I guess in this case, what they're saying is you have an existing basement that's already there for that house. You're not creating a new one. So they're letting you keep that, but they're requiring all the utilities and things that you'd put in the basement to be up above the floodplain.
Exactly. And then also, in addition to that, no inside entrance. So we just won't have a staircase going in the basement or anything like that.
We'll have a nice cold cellar.
Yeah.
And your first floor is that do you know if that's intended to be on grade, is like a little higher than grade to be above the flood, or you know?
Yeah, I believe there's a certain height we have to be above per DEP, but we'll be going up a little bit more.
Okay, so you'll be adding, I guess, a little more to the foundation walls so that
Yeah, 3 courses a block.
Okay. Did any other board members have questions of this witness?
This witness.
Great, thank you. So would you like to call your next witness? I see you have an engineer with you tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Mr. Our board attorney, would you please swear in our engineer? Is that John Manilio?
Yep, John Manilio. Legal name is Giovanni Manilio. You want me to spell that for the board?
Steve, you're on mute, I think, Steve.
I'm on mute?
No, our attorney.
Okay.
Mr. Warner?
John, you're going to be on record as Giovanni?
Yeah, that's my legal name.
All right, if you could spell that for me, well, our attorneys.
Sure. Yep, Giovanni. And last
Okay.
name, I believe you have it spelled right.
Oh, I got it. Good. Okay.
Yes.
Amanda. Oh. Gonna say Amanda or Steve. Can
Sorry about
somebody
that.
swear? That's
Yes,
okay.
I'll definitely swear him in. Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear otherwise affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. And can you just give me your address as well?
Thank you,
Sure.
Amanda.
25 Fairmont Avenue, Somerville, New Jersey, 08876.
Thank you.
I don't know if the board wants me to put my credentials on the record.
Yeah, please do. Your qualifications, I take it you're licensed as an engineer in the state of New Jersey?
Correct. So I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Syracuse University. I'm a professional engineer licensed in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. Testified in front of numerous boards throughout the state. I don't believe I've been in front of this board before, but
But you've been
I've been
accepted as an
practicing for
expert in the field of
15 years.
civil engineering by those other boards?
yes.
I defer to the chair to accept you as an expert in the field of civil engineering.
Yes, and just to confirm, your license in New Jersey is still current and active?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I deem you an expert. Thank you. I'm qualified.
Thank you. All right, so I'm just going to actually just start off. I know there were some questions to the applicant regarding the basement. So I'm just going to read the section of the permit by rule in DEP. So it's more tied to the flood hazard. And the section of the code just says any existing enclosure below the lowest floor of the building, which does not conform to the requirements of, and then it gives a section, which is more of flood proofing or dry flood proofing, such as a basement having a floor that is below grade along all adjoining exterior walls, is abandoned, filled in, and or otherwise modified to conform to requirements of the flood proofing. So what it's pretty much saying is that either the basement has to be filled in or abandoned. And I believe the applicant is just going to keep the basement under the floor, but it's going to be inaccessible. So essentially it's going to be abandoned in place. So hopefully that answers the question regarding the basement. And then I don't know if the board wants me to show any plans or, just give a kind of quick overview.
Yeah, if you could, would you be able to share, I believe you supplied a site plan. If you could share those, walk us through.
Yes. just make sure everybody can see that. So right now what I'm sharing is the plans that were submitted as part of this application. I'm actually going to start with the survey, which I believe was submitted as well, which shows the existing dwelling right here in the middle. It's kind of like a cross shape. And you can also see these lines with the triangles with the letters that say A21, A9, A8. That is the wetlands line that goes around the entire property. So really, this property, there's just a swath, and I'm just going to drag my mouse cursor through it, of
Sorry.
area that's uplands.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Deb, can you confirm that we have this document sent to us, or does this need to be marked as an exhibit?
No, we have it. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
It may have been, I don't know if it was, I have to look and see if it was separate or if it was incorporated in the actual application document. Hold on.
Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Yep, no problem. So there's really only a small swath along the central portion of the property that's not encumbered by wetlands. And then also the whole property is within an area of what's a flood hazard area. So the way we calculated that, there's different methods that the DEP recognizes. The method we used is a very conservative method. It's doing some calculations based on some tables that DEP provides. Again, it's a very conservative value. The other way to do it is actually do an actual study of the stream, which for a project of this size is just not financially, I guess, doable as far as the cost associated with this is going to be so high. So we went with a more conservative, easier approach. But again, the flood hazard elevation is probably higher than what it actually is if we did the calculations with another method. So with that being said,
I'm sorry, let me just interrupt really quick. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I don't see it on the website. So let's just, to be safe, let's just mark this as Exhibit A1, if everybody's okay with that.
Yeah,
For the existing survey? Okay, just to be safe.
Yep, and it's entitled Partial Topographical Survey Wetland Location.
Thank you.
with the
Sorry about
date
that, John.
of- No problem, February 19th, 2021.
Okay.
So yeah, so the current dwelling itself right now is located below the flood elevation. The flood hazard elevation was calculated as 237.5. The existing dwelling right now, the floor elevation is 237.1. So when the applicant had approached us about putting a new structure on this facility, obviously we did our due diligence and we found out that the property is in a flood hazard zone and that the building had to be elevated if we're going to reconstruct it. So the applicant had decided that he wanted to use as much of the existing foundation as possible. So I think that was another question from a board member. There are some foundation walls that will be built, but they will be built essentially almost as a crawl space or kind of at grade to provide a foundation for the new sections of the modular that overhangs the existing foundation walls. The lot itself right now, it is undersized as far as lot area. It's 2 acres where 3 acres is required. And also with the lot width, 250 feet is required where 150 feet is what's existing. And then also with the front yard setback on the from the front, the survey actually shows 72.9, but that's not to the closest point. The closest point is at this kind of bay window, which is 71.6. The ordinance requires 75 feet. So that's pre-existing non-conforming as well. So essentially what we did is we took the new house footprint, put it over the existing footprint. We looked at pushing it back to making apply with the front yard setback. But the issue is the further you push the house back, the more you're into constraints. You can see how close the wetlands line is to the existing structure back here. Yeah, so essentially there are going to be several variances that we are requesting. One is for front yard setback. Again, 75 feet is required. And I'll show the next set of plans, this should have been submitted with the application. This is the variance plan. So this shows the new structure right here. I'm kind of circling it with my mouse cursor. And there is a small porch that comes off of the front of the dwelling as well. And that's where we're measuring the front yard setback. So that new front yard setback is 70 feet So it's a little less than what was there before. But again, it's just a corner of that porch. As you move further away from that corner, we do get further into compliance with the front yard setback. The other variances that we need is the township ordinance does not allow any construction within a critical area. The whole property is a critical area, so there is a hardship there as well, where we wouldn't be able to put a new house on the structure, on this property without a variance. The ordinance also has a couple other requirements for critical areas. There's setbacks requirements from a dwelling to a critical area. 50 feet is required from a front yard or a rear yard of a critical area, and 25 feet from a side yard. Again, the whole property is a critical area, so we can't comply with that. And then the other requirement is that any area outside of a critical area, we're only allowed to use 70% of that for lot coverage. Again, there is no area on the property that's outside the critical area. So all the impervious that we are proposing it can't be calculated, I guess, so that would be a variance. And lastly, also besides the front yard setback, there's also a requirement to have a conservation easement along the frontage of the property with a width of 75 feet. Again, we don't have that distance to the closest portion of the house. We have 70 feet. And that's essentially the site plan and the variances that we are requesting. And I'm just going to kind of just circle back. I know there are some letters from the professionals. I'd like to just kind of handle some of that with testimony if I can. As far as approvals are concerned from DEP.
Sorry, before could you stop sharing the screen for a second? Sorry.
Sure.
Thank you for that. So before we proceed, our board planner, do you have any, would you like any further clarification on, or would you like to speak to your report and or address any other items that that the engineer did not address from your report?
Yeah, I just have a few questions, if I could just ask now. So
Sure.
a couple of things have to do actually with the plans that were submitted. And I understand these are architectural plans and you didn't prepare them. They're prepared by the modular home company. But currently it shows stairs to the basement, right? So those would have to be removed or in some way shown, reflect, that you can't. Another question I had is, I know Mr. Sorry, I'm on. I'm sorry, your name. I screwed that up. But if you're going to add height to the building to sort of, make sure that you're outside, the potential for flooding, and disturbing your home. Do you happen to know if you're going to add, if the height that you have put in your zoning table reflects what that height is going to be?
Yeah, so to answer, I guess, both of those questions. So the architectural plans for the modular, essentially how they come is it's almost like a package. They only take care of the items that they deliver. So that's why the plans don't show the garage or the bump out that's putting in the back, because that's kind of an add-on. So the applicant will need to hire an architect to put those together and submit for building permits. So we'll revise plans on that. As far as the basement, again, initially the thought was that he was going to have a basement, but when he found out that he couldn't do it, it was eliminated. The only thing is he needs to go back to the Mazda people to redo their plans. I think he was just holding off until he got approvals first before spending the money on that.
Sure. So the question I guess I have is, so then an architect takes the modular plans and then does sort of like signed architectural plans? I'm not honestly how it works.
So I believe for the modular portion of the house, the modular hires their own architect to sign and seal and submit for building permits. And I think it's a little different too with the inspections as well. I think they're done off-site with a certification. So the only thing that needs to be submitted for building permits for the applicant's portion is the portion that's not provided by the modular. So he's got to submit separate architectural plans for the garage and that utility bump out.
Okay, and then so that's another question I have is that so when you say bump out, are you talking about the bump out like the bay window or the bump out that would have the utilities?
The utility bump out, I'm sorry.
Okay, so and where is that going to be located? That'll be in the rear of the house?
Yeah, it's right behind the garage. It's going to be at the same elevation as the finished floor elevation.
So when you submit plans, you would show that bump out, because that's not something that the modular people would do. You would have this, whoever does the architecture for this project would have to do that, right? Okay.
That is correct. Yeah, the site plan does reflect the bump out right now, utility bump out.
Okay, all right, but it's not shown in like the elevations or the architectural plans.
Correct.
The other question I had is because, you do need these variances from the Long Hill ordinance having to do with disturbances in critical areas. And I was wondering if you could just give a little information on what the DEP permit allows, because I understand that you're trying to stay in the foundation, within the foundation footprint that exists. Does DEP make you do that? and because here's another question I had is, or could you go outside the footprint? Because, it looks like maybe is the garage and the bump out, would they be outside the footprint, the current foundation footprint? And the question,
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I guess you could finish.
All right. Well, the question I actually had is that you're only providing a one-car garage, and that just seems unusual in this day and age where most people have like 2 or 3 car garages. And so I was curious if you were restricted by DEP, or if that was something that it was just a choice that the applicant made.
So I could have him answer that, but it's not a restriction from DEP as far as number of garage bays.
Okay.
And if you like, I could kind of go through the requirements for the permitting from DEP, or permit by rules and certification that we're asking for. So essentially there's 2 sections. There's the flood hazard section and the freshwater wetland section. So for flood hazard, what we're asking for is what's called a permit by rule 11. So in there, it allows you, and it gives you, there's 8 stipulations if you want to reconstruct, rebuild, or elevate an existing house within a floodway, outside of a floodway within a flood hazard area. So I'll give you the conditions real quick because I have them up. The building cannot be expanded within or relocated into a floodway, which we're not. The footprint of the building does not increase by more than 400 square feet. So that's why we're kind of tied to the existing footprint plus a little bit. The lowest floor of the building is reconstructed or elevated to at least 1 foot above the flood hazard design flood, which we're 1.5 feet above it. Any new enclosure below the lowest floor of the building is not used for habitation. Number 5, I read before, that's in reference to the basement, any existing enclosure below the lowest floor of the building, such as a basement having a floor that is below grade, is abandoned, filled in, or otherwise modified to conform to the requirements of blah, blah, blah. Number 6, no disturbance is located within 25 feet of a top of bank. Number 7, any building being relocated is either moved outside of riparian zone or located within an actively disturbed area, which we're in an actively disturbed area. And number 8, no riparian zone vegetation is cleared, cut, or removed except for vegetation which is within 20 feet of the building, which we're complying with. So that's the flood hazard portion. I'm not going to go through all of it for freshwater wetlands, but it's essentially the same, with just minor tweaks. I think they actually allow 750 square feet of increase of floor area. But again, these are kind of more intended for single family dwellings and to give them a little bit of leeway as far as not submitting for a full permit to the DEP, but it's almost like the engineer is certifying that we comply and that we're I guess taking credit for, we're taking responsibility for it.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the one final question I had is, and maybe this is for the applicant, is do you know what the materials are of the exterior of the modular home and what color they would be?
Yeah, it's going to be vinyl siding.
Okay.
And probably like a earth color. I think we're going with like a tan vinyl side.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Those are the only questions I have right now.
Thank you. Rich, our board engineer, do you have any questions of this witness?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I guess first of all, just because we were just on the permits by rule. And I would say if the board chooses to approve you when you come in for a building permit, you will need to reify that you comply to the township engineer that you comply with all of this relevant sections of the DEP pertaining to a permit by rule number 11. It was my understanding that the section you read, a permit by rule number 11, number 5 is any existing closure below the lowest floor of the building which does not conform to all requirements of section 12P, which is what you said is kind of a floodproofing section, such as a basement having a floor that is below grade along all adjoining exterior walls is abandoned, filled in, and or otherwise modified to conform to the requirements of that section. So I'm not entirely sure that you get to keep the basement and just limit access. That you'll have to explain to the township engineer should this board decide to approve it. I think the intent is to not get access to it, not use it. I know that you are expanding the footprint under a permit by rule. You can expand the footprint up to 400 square feet. You could get a permit by certification, which would take you to 750, but under the 400 square foot permit that you're referring to, I think you will have to, any of the new foundations will have to remain open to floodwaters with flood vents, et cetera. And that's all outlined in that section 12P. And then it might be actually, I'm not entirely, and for the board's clarification, it doesn't really matter whether they aren't required to use any or all of the same foundation. They're allowed to build a footprint up to 400 square foot larger than what exists on the property today, anywhere on the property. They're not required to use the foundation. However, they are constrained by the fact that the wetlands comes right behind them. So as the applicant's engineer, Mr. Manelli, has said, if they were to push it back any, they would run afoul of any permitting for wetlands. So I think the location in and about and around the current foundation is the one that would be permissible by DEP, but they're not required to keep the same foundation. And at some point, I'm going to ask Mr. Manilio to actually show the survey and kind of outline the areas where there will be new foundation and old foundation. If I look at the offsets, and I seem to have left the plans home, those plans at my office, but if I look at the offsets between the survey of the existing property and the survey of your proposed, they differ by 3.4 feet. So your new foundation is actually, according to the offsets, is 3.5 feet narrower. And so some of those walls are going to have to be rebuilt. Look, if you can save any of those walls, I think it's a benefit, but you may need to be burying part of that foundation anyway to comply with the DEP requirements. With regard to the, just again for the board's clarification, they are required to add those courses of block because they do need to have the first floor 1 foot above the design flood elevation, and that's so that if there is a 100-year flood, they don't get flooding on the first floor. And again, all utilities need to be up in that area. They're not concerned about contamination of the water. They're concerned about limiting the amount of flood damage to the property. The DEP is partially about conserving and limiting development in a flood zone so that we don't increase flood heights, but it's also about limiting the amount of flood damage and insurance claims. So that's why the utilities have to be an add-on to the back of that building. I think, Mr. Manilli, you kind of concur with everything I've said so far, and you'll provide information either as a condition of any approval or clarify for the board's edification as to whether any of that basement can remain?
Yes. Yep. Okay. Total agreement.
With regard to the, so I don't really, there are, there's going to be, I guess Mr. Manilli was going to go item by item and discuss my report, and I'll ask any questions subsequent to that, but it might be helpful, at least to my mind. It was a little, it's the footprint that's actually shown. I did some scaling. It seems to be about the same size as the proposed plan looks to be about the same size as what's existing. It was a little frustrating to not be able to figure out how that addition plugs into the back. will that utility room, will there be a door from the modular home into the utility room from within the building or from outside the building? How's that going to work?
Just going to take a look at, I know there was a sketch that was put together. Maybe the applicant could answer that. I'm not 100% sure as far as the connection inside the dwelling or not.
Yeah, I saw there are no windows where the addition is wrapping around. So other than you might lose a bathroom window where the utility room plugs around the back, but it was not shown. So we were kind of left to question. And I would point out for the board's clarification, they're so far under on coverage that any bump that they add onto there is not going to push them into another variance condition. It was just curious as to how that's going to work.
Want me to add to that?
I think the applicant can answer that, Mr. Chairman. Would that be appropriate?
Yes, please.
Since it's only meant for utilities, we're planning on just making an entrance to that room off the back of the garage. So not from the inside of the house.
Okay, that makes sense.
Rich, just as a follow-up to your question, if they're not showing the utility room on the plans, does that create any issue on the setback from any wetlands back there, or not necessarily?
Well, they've included the on the architect site plan. He did include the utility bump out. It is shown in his plan. It's calculated. It is not run afoul of any of the wetlands. It's just not shown. It was not included in the architectural package.
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
It's to be stick built on site, which is why.
Yeah, but you will need to present building permits, structural materials, all that sort of stuff, footings, etc. And just be aware that there's enough changes in configuration between the existing foundation and the little bump outs and things like that. You may be constructing more foundation than you expect and using less than you expect, but and my suspicion is that most likely that will have to be filled anyway. So it certainly can structurally support it, but or I believe it will. But you may be doing more foundation than you think because there are discrepancies between the existing foundation plan and your plans from the prefab company.
Understood.
Rich, do you have any other questions of this witness?
I would actually, for the applicant, I don't. For Mr. Manilio, I'm assuming that you're agreeing to provide any of the information that we requested in our report.
Yeah, I'll leave it up to you if you want me to go comment by comment, but if not, I could just scan real quick and see if there's anything that I don't agree with.
Yeah, I think it's probably easier for the board. Hopefully they read my report, but if you can at least let me know if you have any questions or there's anything you can't comply with, because as I said, if the board sees to approve this, part of the resolution will be that you meet each individual items and you won't get resolution approval until you do. So now will be the time to bring them up.
Right, no, we don't have no issues with any of the comments. If there's anything else you want me to kind of answer that was not answered, I can.
And you will need, obviously, you'll need permits from the Board of Health that'll follow the state regulations for the septic system.
Yeah, we actually have them in place already. We could forward the approvals to your office. They were approved in February.
Okay, if you have that, that'd be great. I did note that you did receive Morris County Soil Conservation Service approval. That's good. Obviously, you may need to work with us or the township engineer because I suspect the township ordinance requires that because there's more than 1,000 square feet of disturbance, and even though there's less than 400 square feet of new impervious, that they meet the stormwater management section of the ordinance, which means installation of dry wells. My suspicion is that they might hit a high water table and or hit poor perk. There are provisions in the ordinance that allows for them to redesign around that. Quite frankly, it's more in keeping with current DEP non-structural ideas to let that water filter across the backyard and ultimately into the Black Brook. But just be aware that under the ordinance, you will be required to do a perk test. And if that perk test yields unsatisfactory results, you'll need to find an alternate system of handling your stormwater, which may or may not involve detention, but that would be a follow-up that would have to be provided.
Yep, we're in agreement.
Also, I wanted just to be clear, there are no decks, patios, or other accessory structures shown on this property. And so it seemed unlikely that the applicant is not going to ever want a patio back there. Obviously, it's not part of the application. We can't force you to put one on there, but if you were going to do it, it would be better to do it now and get any permits or security approvals that might trigger between the Board of Adjustment, or also be aware if when complete, you decide to do a patio out there and it doesn't require board approval, that you would still be subject to the stormwater management regulations. In other words, you can't do a 200 square foot increase now and design a small dry well and then come back in a year from now and design it with a big patio and say, well, I did 395 square feet of patio, I'm under your regulations. They would be cumulative, so that any addition that you put on this in the future that would cumulatively add more than 400 square feet over the current existing would be subject to stormwater regulation and may require increased stormwater management as required.
I think that's essentially something that the applicant needs to confirm understanding if he's not asking for anything further at this point in time.
Yeah.
Correct, Rich?
I understand.
Correct.
Okay.
May I ask something here? To be clear, he can have approval for that now and not build it, and he could build it at some point in the future. Is that correct?
I would defer to Deb as to how long the approvals stay good for before they have to actually construct. But obviously he's going to be building the house for 6 months or something like that. Those permits will stay open. I'm not sure what the time, how long the variances run with the land, but often local ordinances have timelines that building permits have to be pulled, and when they're closed out, you'd have to come back.
I think last week the board approved one for an extension for 3 years.
Yeah, you'd have to do an extension.
Yes, if you don't permit the project for a variance approval within a year, you have to get an extension. Once you permit the project, permits are good for 1 year. Just another note about the patio, if they don't have it on right now, that is a separate zoning application at a future date.
He cannot modify his existing plan to include the patio.
He can, because his coverage is so under because of the size of the lot.
Oh,
so
I
if
thought
they,
you said, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you said it's a separate zone application.
so it is. So basically, for the structure itself is what the board is looking at. Obviously, it would be in the applicant's best interest to include any, let's say, deck or patio onto the application now, just for the construction permits and review by our township engineer. If the applicant chooses not to do that, assuming the board gives approval for this application and the bulk variances, at some point in the future, if they add a deck or a patio or anything, they have to come back to me with a separate zoning application.
Okay, so my original question was if he decides tonight that at some point in the future, he may want a shed or a patio and adds that lot coverage into the calculation, he could theoretically proceed with his application as it is on paper now, but have the flexibility to add later on.
Correct.
And at some point that additional lot coverage may expire, but he could always come to the board and ask for an extension. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's clear.
Mhm.
Thank you.
No, I have no further questions then.
Thank you. Do any board members have a question of this witness?
Mr. Chairman, if and when no board members do, I did have a few, if I may.
Sure, I just have a couple if I could. On your site plan, I think on my sheet it's called out as sheet 2 of 2. I have a question regarding your setback dimensions. I see a 70-foot setback line from the center line of the road. So I guess the property line's in the center line of White Bridge Road. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that is correct. So we show the two dimensions, the 70 to the actual property line, which is the center line, and 45 to the looks like right-of-way line.
Okay, so the 70 foot is to the center line. Now I'm looking on this plan, and if I see the setback line in the center, if I'm looking at that correctly, it looks like it's saying the 75 foot front yard setback is almost at the rear of the property. Can you explain that? I mean, the rear of the house. I'm sorry, the rear of the house.
So yeah, I think the anticipation was, or the assumption was, that the setback would have been from the right-of-way line.
Okay, but
So that's why it's
right. But I'm getting two different dimensions. I'm getting which one is, where's the setback line supposed to be at, the front or the back?
75 feet off the, I guess the when you say back, I mean the literal back, you mean the second line, right?
Right. Well, I'm looking at the plan. So I've got 70 feet off the center line, which I guess is where the property line is. But then when I'm looking at the plan, I see a line coming across perpendicular to parallel to White Bridge Road that says the 75 foot front yard setback is actually in the rear of the house.
Correct.
So where is the 75 foot setback measured from?
From the right-of-way line, which is the line that I guess goes through those two trees in the front, if you're looking at the plan.
Okay, so if the right of way is the dimensional mark, then why do we have 70 feet to the set? I guess I don't understand why the setback origin of the setback isn't at the same location.
So actually, I'm going to defer that to your professionals on how they want to interpret the front yard. I interpreted it off the right of way as far as the setback line. Yeah.
Liz, if you're trying to
I think
talk
you're on
here,
mute.
Okay, so the definition for front yard is from the street line to the nearest point of the building. So that's where the measurement should be from the lot line abutting the street.
so from the street.
The chair has a good question though, and that is, why is there a 75 foot front yard setback line across the rear building line, essentially? If I understand the question, I have the same question.
Yeah, I think the application needs to be amended, Liz, so the front yard setback is actually 45, not 70. Is that correct?
Well, except that the driveway, now I'm a little confused because the driveway does the driveway go into the roadway?
Yeah, it goes because the traveled way, obviously there's the distance between the traveled way or the bituminous and the 15 feet to the right of way or to the right of way line. So I think that it's confusing on the drawing, but I think that the correct response is that the variance requested is for a 45 foot setback where 75 feet is required.
Yes, okay, I would agree with you, Rich.
Okay, are we okay with amending the variance request on that dimensional setback number?
From a legal standpoint, it's sufficient because it's covered under the catch-alls. It's a bulk variance, and the notice would still be sufficient. The board would still have jurisdiction for that type of modification during or recognition during the pendency of the hearing.
Okay. As a follow-up to that, I see the dimension is measured to, I guess that's a front porch or a stoop. I'm looking at the dimensions. Looks like maybe it's about a 5 foot or so difference between grade and the porch. So you have a fairly decent stair. Is there a reason why you're not measuring to the porch as opposed to the stair?
Off the top of my head, I believe the ordinance allows encroachment for the stairs. But I would need to look at the ordinance again, to be honest with you.
And is that are you referring to the front yard setback encroachment or the conservation easement encroachment?
I think it has to do with the definition of the front yard. So I think that was implied with the setback.
Okay, because I think and Liz, you correct me if I'm wrong here, I think we've got two variances on this. One's the front yard setback, but we also have a conservation easement, correct?
Correct, that's right.
Both at 75 feet?
That's right.
Okay. Okay. So if that is true on the front yard setback, I'm not certain that it's true on the conservation easement. So again, maybe we get that clarified.
So, sorry, can you, what is the difference? What is the clarification you're looking for?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I think the conservation easement basically says you have to leave the area in the conservation easement alone. And I think what the applicant's engineer just mentioned is that he's measuring to the front porch as opposed to the front steps because I guess he thinks there's an exception for the
I don't believe there is an exception for the steps. I think the setback should be to the steps.
Okay, so that 45 is actually going to be a lower number then.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to need the magnitude of that number in order to have a resolution, whether it's granting or denying the application. Is that about a
So I
5
can give
foot?
that number. So do you want the number from the steps? So from the steps to the right-of-way line is 39.2 feet.
Okay. So that's the magnitude
Now,
of
I guess-
relief for the front yard setback to the well, the front yard setback, the traditional front yard setback is 39.2
Right.
versus 75 required.
Right, and I don't know, we never justified or I guess put a number to the conservation easement, but I would assume that would also include the paver walkway in the front as well, not complying, right?
Right.
So then to quantify that would be 35.3 feet.
I'm
The
sorry,
conservation 0.3.
39.3, okay.
And just to be clear, this is the conservation variance, not the front yard setback.
Right.
Correct.
Right. And that really, as I understand, if I may, Mr. Chairman, as I understand that, while it's good to have the magnitude of the deviation, any development within the 75 foot, even if it were 74 and a half feet, there were no encroachments, would constitute a variance with respect to LU 141.1, the 75 foot wide conservation easement requirement. But nevertheless, we have a magnitude of that encroachment such that 35.3 feet is, I guess, there's no encroachment, and the balance, the encroachment goes in the difference between 75 and 35.3. Is that correct, Mr. Manillo?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that last portion again?
You're encroaching, yeah. You're encroaching 35.3 feet or 35.3 feet of the conservation easement width there is no encroachment. Which way is it?
The latter. So there's 35.3 feet left of conservation easement between the closest point of
Okay,
the property line and
preserved.
the preserved, correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And along those lines, can you just describe in terms of obviously the idea behind the conservation easement is that you maintain sort of a natural state in that area. Can you describe the visual scene that would be seen from White Bridge Road and any or proposed shrubbery or things that were to mitigate that?
Yeah, so essentially it's going to be unchanged from what's there today. With the two pine trees are going to remain, but there is going to be the inclusion of the brick paver walkway. I think that's pretty much the only difference between what's out there today and in front of the existing house and what's not, but it'll be, lawn area.
Thank you. And I understand the architecturals are designed by someone else, but just to be clear, where the architectural elevation, let's see what drawing it is. The front elevation showing the front porch and the garage. From what we just described, the garage would actually probably be set down from the first floor, like around 5 feet. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and then there'd be a large front step, or a front step equivalent to that height to get you down to grade.
Correct.
Okay, all right. So this, and then the dashed in portion is, I guess that's not the modular construction. That's going to be handled separately on the architectural.
I'm sorry, Chairman. What was that first? I heard the what portion?
On the architectural elevation, there's a portion that's sort of dashed in. It looks like it's the garage, looks like it's the front porch and whatnot. That's not part of the modular application. It's going to be separate.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And then just to clarify, so the existing structure right now has if it were habitable, I know it's a little deteriorated, but it would have habitable space within the flood zone, within the flood elevation now, and the proposed construction would elevate that above the flood elevation?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions. Mr. Board Attorney, oh wait, I'm sorry, Harry, it looks like you have
I have a question. I was looking at the rear elevation, I guess, and it looks like on the back side of the house, there's I don't know if it's a sliding door or French doors that go out to, I don't know if they're steps, but beyond that, I'm wondering what happens at the back of the house. It's kind of hard to tell from the overhead, but are we just walking out to steps that go down to grass? Or we talked about that there is no patio or deck plan right now. So I just want clarification what happens in the back of the house. For anybody that worked on this.
I can add, as of right now, we just have steps going down out those doors.
Steps that go down to grass, or
Yeah,
there's stepping stones, there's no patio. Do you want a
Yeah.
patio?
not sure. I mean, it's been a long time coming to get into the meeting. We're just trying to get through this first and move on from there.
Sure, I can appreciate that. I'm sure it's taken a lot of energy to get to this point, but I think what some people have kind of tried to tell you is now's a good time to ask for something like that so that you don't have to go through all this again. Is that right, Mr. Warner?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, depending upon what was going to be asked for later, it might be able to be handled at the zoning permit stage as opposed to requiring a full-blown board hearing and approval. But either way, I think the points, if I may, well taken, that now would be the time to save time, money, and effort down the road, regardless of whether it's simply administratively handled or board handled at that point.
And I don't think anyone's suggesting that you request a 700-foot long patio in the back, because that would be quite expensive. But something beyond just a couple steps down to grass might be enjoyable for you.
Yeah, excuse me one second.
If you were to do a 15 by 15 patio or something down there and you decide to build something smaller, you could do that, but you might want to put in a claim on something that's reasonable now. And include it in your wetland permits as well, because you are flirting around that and you can get permits to go into those wetland areas. But I also, if the board, if you decide to put a 15 by 15 patio now or whatever you decide, you want to make sure that's part of your permits for your wetland permits as well.
So you definitely don't want to go back to them again.
No.
Yeah, no. Yeah, well, I'll have to consult with John and find out what we can put in back there. But I do agree that it would be enjoyable to have a space there behind the house, not just go down into grass.
Soggy grass.
Yes. Not too soggy, but it can get wet.
If I may, Mr. Manillo and Mr. Elliman, would you request of the board that 15 by 15 square foot patio if the board were to consider it? And I don't believe it would require any additional variance relief because you're well below the coverage, wouldn't be a setback issue. As far as I can tell, certainly Liz will correct me if I'm wrong if there is additional variance relief. But and you can just, as a condition of approval, with all the other conditions of approval, if there is an approval, just give us that amended coverage. Or I suspect Rich can, maybe even I could figure it out, 15 by 15. But what that additional coverage number would be, that's still well below the 15% required. Would the board be authorized to give you that relief if it's so desired?
Yeah, so just to answer the applicant's question, I think 15 by 15 is reasonable. And I think we should ask for it right now. And I'm going to do the numbers real quick for you guys. So it's 225.
225 square feet,
Yep.
225.
Whatever the lot area is, we could increase the coverage by a couple of percentage points, perhaps, not even.
Having just expanded a patio twice at my own house, I might suggest, look, it's a big lot. I would say start with 15 by 20. If you want to build something smaller, that's 15 by 20 is also easier to do the math on. But although I do cover all my squares without getting my slide rule out, so 15 by 15 is 225. But you could, 15 by 20, and if you want to build smaller, nothing more frustrating than getting when you get that furniture on the patio and realizing, gee, I wish we had 2 feet more or 3 feet more, et cetera. But it's a big lot. I just want to make sure that you, as I said, you accounted into all your environmental permits.
Right. Is the board authorized to give you 300 square foot patio if they so desire? Mr. Alleman?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Wise choice. Okay. I do have questions when all the board members are done.
Do any board members have any other questions of this witness? No?
I would like to ask one simple question. I'm assuming that the proposed septic field has been checked and it will perk. You'll be able to use it?
Correct. Yeah, correct. Full approval from the Board of Health and from DEP.
So we're good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Jerry, do you have a question? You're on mute. Jerry, you're still muted. We can't hear you. Jerry?
Okay, sorry, just having trouble getting off mute there. So similarly, I think the applicant should consider, maybe it's not the right way to phrase it, but considering that the applicant has a 1-car garage and no basement utility, no basement access, he's probably going to want a shed also at some point, some type of storage, outside storage unit. Add that in too if he wants. I mean, ask him if he wants that, because save another trip to the board, right?
I do see that there's a concrete footing for an old garage back by the proposed septic tank way back.
Is that counted in the lot coverage calculation?
I do not know.
It is. Yes, it is. So that existing
counted as coverage
concrete,
already? So it's
yes,
a
it is.
space saver, so to speak. So he doesn't really need, okay.
What's
Thank
the
you.
what's the current lot coverage, even with the added patio? Rich or Mr. Manila?
I don't want to speak out of turn because I know there's a difference between the which right-of-way line we use as well. So
Why are we
you
asking the
guys need
question?
a number
Sorry, what
for
was
this.
the question?
The reason why I'm asking the question is because he can come for a shed anytime. He doesn't have to. That shed doesn't have to come for the board.
I know, but if he's over the lot coverage, which he is already, then he would.
That's
need
why I'm
to come
asking.
To the board.
I don't think. I think
the
it's well.
application is
under.
asking for a lot coverage variance, right? Isn't it?
No, he's not.
No.
He's not? Okay.
No, he's under. He's well under. That's why. As long
Okay.
as he can make 10 feet from either side or rear property line.
Fair enough. Then
And-
I'll retract that statement
Yep.
then.
Okay.
Any other questions of board members of this witness?
Yeah, I was just looking at the overhead of the, I guess, the larger printout that I have here. And it looks like there's steps behind the garage, but I'm not quite sure because I don't see it in anything else. Is that what I'm seeing? Are those steps, or what is that back there?
That is correct. That's to get into the utility room.
Oh, the utility room's back there.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Steve, do you have any questions of?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize if this was asked and answered earlier, but Mr. Manillo, well, from what I've heard, it may not be that you're utilizing the exact existing foundation. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're trying to utilize as much as we can, but it's not 100%.
Okay, and I'll defer to our planner, Ms. Laney, but has always been my understanding that if we're not utilizing the same foundation, that we may have a situation where there's more than mere partial destruction of the existing dwelling, and that it would not constitute, that it would constitute in essence a knockdown rebuild, which for planning purposes and zoning purposes is considered the same as vacant land. And therefore, technically, the lot area and lot width would not constitute a pre-existing nonconformity, but actually would require lot area and lot width variance relief, if indeed it is a quote unquote knockdown rebuild. For what it's worth, you noticed sufficiently for it. It was explicit in the notice. So Liz, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Liz, is that your understanding that this would not be would require lot area and lot width variance relief?
I think it doesn't hurt if they've noticed for it to ask for it, just to be on the safe side. I don't see anything in the current ordinance that really says what constitutes, reconstruction and what constitutes new construction. At what point are you new construction? So I think just to be on the safe side, since it's a little unclear right now what portions of the foundation are going to be reused, that the applicant just go and seek those two variances.
And in light thereof, it's not to give planning testimony for anyone, but I think the lot area is what it is and the lot width is what it is. It's not as if it can be expanded necessarily, but so presumably the same C1 undue hardship arguments that would be made for the other variance relief would be made by the applicant for that variance relief. But I just wanted to clarify that for the record, and that'll be referenced in the resolution. I guess I'm going to revisit a question that was asked before, because to the extent that that the applicant is seeking to encroach into the conservation easement, as well as further encroach into the front yard setback, the board certainly would be well within its right to wonder about whether or not the applicant would be willing to add additional landscaping, vegetative screening landscaping. So again, the applicant is not stipulating to do so if the board so desired. Either Mr. Manillo or Mr. Alleman.
So you're asking about putting in landscaping
in the front yard, if the board requested like some small bushes and shrubs and whatnot to screen the front yard, if you would be amenable to that.
Oh yeah, I'm planning on adding landscaping in front of the house.
As something that would be, if the board so desired, subject to the reasonable discretion of the planner, if Liz would be amenable to that. Would that be something you could stipulate to, Mr. Alleman?
Sure.
Okay. I'm sure the board appreciates that. I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Deb, do we have any members of the public with any questions?
We do have one member of the public that has joined our meeting. So that would be Mr. Bettinas. Do you have any questions for this applicant, Mr. Bettinas? You could raise your hand. Going once, going twice. Nope, no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Okay, great. Would Mr. Tallman, would you like to just provide us with a closing statement of the application and what you're hoping to do here?
Guess I'm just hoping to move in eventually, get married and have family and enjoy life.
Thank you for your time. Deb, again, for the public, is there our one member of the public? Can you see if anyone would like to make public statements on this application?
Yes, this would be the time for the public if you have any statements, either in favor or otherwise. Raise your hand. Going once, going twice. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. So I'd like to open this up to deliberations of the board. Tom, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an interesting one. And I think that considering the property's current condition and what Mr. Alleman is proposing, considering all the stipulations that were raised in discussion, I see that the positives will outweigh the negatives, and I would be in favor of this application. I look forward to you being a neighbor.
Great, thank you. Mr. Malloy.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. I think the positives outweigh the negatives on this. The fact that we didn't have any neighbors come to offer any concerns is a good thing, and it's certainly going to be a enhancement to the property to have this new home built. So I plan on voting in favor of the application.
Thank you. Mr. Giannakis.
I think the applicant has taken careful consideration of the property that he acquired and has a great plan for improving it. His genuineness seems to come through, and he's going to make a great addition to Long Hill Township. And I would be inclined to vote in favor of this.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenberg.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the variance that they're requesting regarding the front yard setback, it'd probably be a little bit of an undue hardship to have to move the entire foundation back just to get outside of the setback. So I believe that they've showed that that would be difficult, and I don't think there'd be any detriment to to the neighborhood, being that they're really not changing the footprint of the existing home. So I think that they've showed that. And in general, I don't have any issues with this, and I appreciate the applicant's time and effort.
Thank you. Mr. Aronio.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's said. I think that given the setback requirements and the DEP regulations, it wouldn't be practical to have him move that foundation. So I think he's demonstrated that's a reasonable alternative, is to build the house and have an exception for our variances. And I definitely don't think that our zoning plan would be impaired by this. I don't think any surrounding neighbors would be impacted by this in any way. So therefore, and by the way, he's going to make a substantial improvement to that property and that area, which it's badly needed. So I think that the benefits would definitely outweigh any detriment. So I'm in favor of the application.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Hain.
Yes, I have to agree with all my colleagues. I think he's going to improve the area quite well. I've been in this town for 25 years and I welcome you. You're going to love this town. It's a great community and you've definitely improved the area. So I agree.
Great, thank you. And I'm in agreement as well. I believe the property definitely has some hardships with the flood zone that you're located in. The location of the house is constrained by the wetlands at the rear of the property. With the with proposed vegetative screening up at the front yard, you can definitely mitigate any if there were any detrimental impacts on the front yard setback, that can be mitigated. And in addition to improving the property, you're taking what theoretically was a habitable zone in a floodplain and elevating that above the floodplain, which is a good thing as well. So I think the benefits definitely outweigh any detriments. I think it advances the purpose of the land use law and the township master plan, and I'm in favor of the application as well. Okay, Mr. Warner, could you please go over any conditions?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. If I understand the board correctly, the board is about to make a motion to grant the application for variance relief, minimum lot area, minimum lot width, minimum front yard setback 45, or actually 39.3 going from memory, versus 75 feet minimum required, as well as the encroachments into the conservation easement violating ordinance 141.1 and the disturbance of critical areas violating 3 subsections of ordinance 142.1. Based upon the deliberations of the board, it appeared as if the board was granting the relief, will be granting the relief on the alternative bases of C1 undue hardship, as well as C2 flexible C variance benefits substantially outweighing the detriments. And I'm also assuming, based on the deliberations, it's with all the stipulated 2 conditions, including but not limited to all the conditions set forth in the October 29 memorandum of our planner, Ms. Laney, as well as all the conditions and items set forth in our the technical review number 1, October 28, 2021, of our from our board engineer, Mr. Keller, as well as the addition of vegetative screening, subject to the review and approval within the reasonable discretion of our planner, Ms. Laney. And I don't see anything else, but I remain open if I missed any stipulated 2 conditions.
I don't know if you mentioned it, just the one thing about the landscaping screening on the front. Did we mention that?
Yes, I did, subject to Ms. Laney.
Okay.
Her reasonable discretion in my many years of experience, her discretion is always reasonable in my opinion, at least. So that's what I have as a motion to grant, if that's if I accurately memorialized what I believe was the board's deliberations.
Great.
I'll move that as he said it.
Great. Did I get a second for that? Was that Jonathan? Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Rodeo,
Yes.
Mr. Rosenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Giannakis,
Yes.
Mr. Grosskopf,
Yes.
Mr. Malloy.
Yes.
Mr. Hain is voting this evening in place of Chairman Correct. Mr. Hain.
Yes.
And Vice Chairman Johnson acting as our chairman tonight.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Good job.
Welcome to the neighborhood.
Okay.
Thanks,
okay.
everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks. You can drop off. Thank you so
Good
much.
luck.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on, we don't have any old business or new business. Is that correct? Deb?
Yep, nothing to report. I will, we've gotten in a couple new applications last week and this week, so I will update the application status and have it sent out to everybody just for their pleasure at the end of the week.
Great, thank you.
Great.
And just for the clarification, our next board meeting is when?
Is next week, because next week on the 9th, we that's a good point to add. We have received 7 proposals for board engineers, since our fabulous Casey and Keller, Rich and Mike are not going to be with us anymore. I know. So we've received 7 proposals that the RFP committee has received and will be reviewing. So next week on Tuesday, we will be holding an executive session to interview the candidates.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, with that said, if there's nothing else, could I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll move it.
Great. A second.
Jerry, say hi to Marigold for me.
Okay.
Will do.
All in favor? Aye. All right, great. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you. Have a good
everybody.
night, all.
Have a good night.
Hey.
Take care, be well.